Good evening, everybody.
Yeah, I would just start with your introduction, Dr. Madhuri.
Yeah.
Good evening, everyone. This is Kavita Agarwal, National President, National Childcare Council, Women's Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry. It is an immense pleasure to be back with a very informative workshop on COVID, childcare in COVID, with Dr. Madhuri Sodagam, a pediatrician and a neonatologist. Not taking much of time, I would request my council member, Umaji, to continue with Dr. Madhuri's introduction. Over to you, Umaji.
Hi, welcome, Dr. Madhuri. Dr. Madhuri Prabhu, she practices pediatrics in Chennai, has over 15 years of experience in pediatrics and neonatology. Currently, she is one of the neonatologists in the NICU team at Motherhood. She trained in UK in neonatology at Leeds, which is a tertiary referral center in the UK. On returning to India, she worked as a consultant neonatologist for 4 years at Kanchi Kamakoti Child's Trust Hospital, which is a 40-bedded tertiary care neonatal unit in the whole of South India. She is skilled in managing all aspects of neonatal care, ranging from extreme preterm to term. She is experienced in developmental pediatrics. Today, she is going to talk about child care during the times of COVID. Please go ahead, Dr. Madhuri.
Thank you very much for this introduction. And first of all, I really apologize for the extreme delay. I think we had prepared for this talk long ago, and there was an emergency which I really couldn't avoid. So just to get on with the topic, today's topic is about childcare in COVID. I think we've been caught in this pandemic now for the last 1.5 years. And now with the first wave that has passed by, and then we have the second wave, which was completely taken aback, which had completely taken us aback with a lot of issues. The third wave is actually is predicted. And some people predict that children are the ones who are going to be affected during the third wave. And I think it's mostly due to is available now. So the adults are vaccinated, so the kids are yet to be vaccinated. So I think that's the reason why there is a lot of prediction that children might be affected more during the third wave. So whatever it is, second wave, first wave, third wave, whatever, I think generally, we all need to have a background information about what is COVID-19. I think most of us know about it. But I thought I'll just take a brief overview and then touch a few important things that we have been through and what is important for us, and also take you through to childcare regarding during these COVID times. So my overview would be regarding what is COVID first, what is COVID-19, the problems that are associated with lockdown, that we had an extended lockdown, which is completely, no one had imagined the extent to which we would end up in this lockdown and the problems associated with it. And the next important thing that I think we all want to know is how we are going to try and prevent this COVID in future and how we're going to handle it. So what are the precautions that we all need to take? I think it's not going to be possible just as a single set. I think unitedly we have to take a precaution. We have to take these precautions in order to prevent COVID. I think not at state level, not at home level. It has to be a universal, national, while globally, internationally, we have to take these precautions, and only then we will be able to prevent this infection. And a very important thing for our presentation is when to consult a pediatrician. So that is very important, when you need to access a pediatrician, how you can access a pediatrician, and what are the things you need to look out for, and when you need to ask for help. So what is COVID-19? So coronavirus disease was discovered in 2019, end of 2019. And this was named as SARS-CoV-2. We've had SARS-CoV-1 2-3 years prior, which wasn't as severe as this coronavirus. But this coronavirus that we have, that is the SARS-CoV-2, has turned out to be quite lethal to us. And the symptoms, as we all know, is cough, fever, shortness of breath. Not in all, but some other symptoms in lot of other, in pertaining to children, I will talk. So fever, cough are usually found in a lot of children, but a lot of children also come to us with diarrhea and vomiting. So these are not unusual at all. And usually the incubation period in the first wave we had was 2 to 14 days, which was really cut short very much in the second wave to only less than a week. And why? How is it different in children and adults? Generally, what we have seen what we have seen in during this time of COVID infection is it is usually less common in children. Why is it less common in children? And also, the other thing is it is less serious in children. So I think this is pertaining to the first wave when it was less common in children. But in the second wave, we've seen that a lot of children have been affected with the COVID infection. So why is it so that it is less serious in children? Because it is linked to some enzyme called ACE, which is actually not there in children. And it is known that the COVID infection or the COVID, the protein, the spike protein, which is there in the COVID virus, actually attaches itself to this ACE enzyme, which is actually absent in children. So usually children are not prone to severe infection. So that's why it is less serious in children. So how does it spread? I think this is very important question as a community. How does the virus spread? Because it usually spreads person to person, and it is via respiratory droplets, meaning when you cough or sneeze, you tend to spread the infection. It is very much like the flu. It is not different from the flu at all. And also when somebody coughs or sneezes, then and the surfaces get, the surfaces has virus on it, and then when another person touches the surface, then and by touching the surface which has the virus and then touching the nose or the face or the eyes, they can spread the infection from one person to the other. So any sort of body fluids can have the virus. That is what it's being said. So including the stools also. So approximately it takes about 2 to 14 days and a median of 5 days for an infected person to show the symptoms. This was very much so in the first wave, but during the second wave, it was a very short incubation period. I think we would all agree with that. It was only 2 or 3 days, and it spread like rapid fire. So people likely most infectious while they are most symptomatic, like those who were coughing and sneezing were the ones who were most infectious. And so, and also there were a lot of asymptomatic people who, although they were not showing symptoms of the infection, but definitely did spread the infection. And children form a very important part during this asymptomatic spread of infection because they are not seriously affected. And coughs and colds are very common in children. It doesn't really have to be COVID, it could be flu or anything. But COVID was so common among children as well during the second wave that asymptomatic carriers was very common during the second wave. So spread from people without symptoms also appears possible. That's what I talked about, asymptomatic carriers. So I just a little diagrammatic representation and a little colorful representation how there can be modes of transmission. So if any person who has the virus coughs or sneezes can spread the infection, and these infected droplets go around, and when these droplets get onto the hand of another person, or if you touch the surface of where these droplets are there, then the virus gets transferred. Again, sneezing, coughing by infected person, infected droplets get on hand, and then the virus gets transferred. So this is the commonest mode of transmission. So so we now know the mode of transmission, and now is our important goal, which is prevention. How are we going to prevent this transmission? So there are the 3 major important prevention strategies that we all have to do as a collectively. So hand hygiene can be hand washing or with soap and water, or it could be alcohol rub where hand washing is not available. Water is not available or soap is not available. So you could use hand sanitizer, which has 60 to 70% alcohol content in the hand sanitizer. And second thing is respiratory hygiene. So when you cough or sneeze, kindly use a tissue, or you use the typical the cough-a-tic, that is you cough or sneeze onto your elbow, bended elbow, and then use a tissue to wipe off, and please dispose the tissue into a dustbin, which is a closed dustbin preferably. The other way is to prevent this. So one of the part of this respiratory hygiene is wearing a mask. So regardless of whether you have a cold or a cough, it is extremely important that you wear a mask. So we have different layered masks now, and we have different types of masks that are available at the moment. So all of these, so whatever it is, you need to wear a mask. It is part of the respiratory hygiene. And social distance. Social distancing is also of extreme prime importance because a 1 meter social distancing between two individuals is extremely important to prevent the spread of the infection. So what is hand hygiene? So importance of hand hygiene is to wash your hands as frequently as you can whenever you are in contact, especially when you touch your eyes or nose or your face, or after blowing your nose or coughing or sneezing. And again, if as I said previously, if you don't have access to soap and water, it is extremely important to use a hand sanitizer if the soap and water is not available. And the hand sanitizer should contain at least 70% alcohol as a base. So, and what you do not do is do not touch your eyes, nose, and mouth with unwashed hands. Do not touch surfaces like doorbells and doorknobs, elevators, and surfaces without, do not touch these surfaces and then touch your eyes, nose, and mouth. So respiratory hygiene, as we talked about, hand washing, using a handkerchief, cover or sneeze into your bent arm in case you are not carrying a tissue or a handkerchief, and please to wash your hands afterwards, after you have coughed or sneezed. And extremely important, wash with soap or use a hand sanitizer. Please do not use little kerchiefs or chunnis or palus of sari, which are usually done by people. And extremely important, which is part of our national habit, is do not spit in the open. We see a lot of people, in fact, I think it's come down drastically with the coronavirus, but still there are a lot of areas where people do spit out in the open, which is actually not a right thing to do. It is not a good thing to do. It's not a part of respiratory hygiene at all. So social distancing is another thing extremely important to stay at home unless absolutely you need to go out. I think still, even though now that we have a little control over the virus, still social distancing, hand washing, and the respiratory hygiene has to be followed. And stay at home if it is really not necessary for you to go out. And also, important part of this is not to have gatherings of more than 3 or 4 people at one time in an evening, or go to crowded places like markets, shopping malls, and mailas. Although we still have a little control over the virus is under control now, but to prevent the third wave, to prevent the future waves coming on, I think it is extremely important that we all do follow these sort of important prevention. We need to take this sort of prevention in order to prevent this sort of further waves in future. So specific prevention, what sort of specific prevention are we looking at for coronavirus? See, previously we were talking, there were a lot of information that came up in the newspapers and in the media about taking vitamin C, zinc, multivitamin syrup, which I think has no base for, which we have come to know that long-term consumption of, because this lockdown has been going down and coronavirus, the saga doesn't seem to be ending. We've been going on now for the last 1.5 years. So, so someone staying on these sort of supplements for that long is also not advisable. So now we started breaking off the routine, and now that we know that these sort of vitamins are not, they don't prevent the sort of infection. But yes, if you a healthy diet instead, rich in fruits and vegetables, does help build up your immune system. Earlier on, we were talking about turmeric, garlic, and ginger. I think they generally prevent this. They boost your immunity. They can boost your immunity. But prevention of coronavirus is definitely, we don't agree with it at all. So, and there was also a little note about whether these sort of things, these addition of multivitamins, zinc, vitamin C, fruits rich in vitamins, all these things have a protection against flu virus. I think they generally, on a whole, it's a myth, and they generally enhance your sort of immunity. And so immunity against all sort of virus infections. So and that's a general protection. So there is no any sort of specific protection against coronavirus. Now, there was another little information that came about regarding the MMR vaccination and BCG vaccination for protection against COVID-19, which again has not been proven at all. So earlier on in the first wave, when we were the late to be attacked, we had the Europe and the America and Britain affected first, and then following that only, we were the last to be affected. So we thought that we on a routine basis in India, we gave MMR and BCG vaccination. We make sure that everybody has it, and we give booster doses of MMR. So we were under the impression that that does give us some sort of immunity, which is not actually proven. And seasonal flu vaccination. Regarding seasonal flu, I think it is recommended that all children under the age of 5 should have a flu shot once a year. And it does protect against flu vaccination. Whether it protects against COVID or not, it is still not proven, but definitely it does protect against flu vaccination. And now we have, now that the one that is available, so the one that we could protect our children against is the flu virus. And we have a flu vaccination that is available. So it is extremely important that all children, especially under 5 years of age, should take up flu vaccine every year until they are 5 years of age. And beyond 5, it is not mandatory, but you could do if you wish to. So vaccine for coronavirus, there's a lot of research that is coming in many countries. There are a lot of the vaccine has come up, and US is giving vaccinations for children also under the age of 18, UK, and India also we are under trials. I'll talk about vaccination a little later when we have a separate slide on that. Now, we come on to when to consult a pediatrician. For children, when to consult a pediatrician. So any sort of, in a pandemic situation, I think whenever, if it was, given the pandemic situation, I think it's extremely important that all parents must talk to their pediatrician or consult a pediatrician if the children have fever, if they have cough, or if they have any shortness of breath. So fever, colds, cough, I think it is important to consult your pediatrician in the first instance, and so that you get the warning signs, when you need to come back again, and what you need to look out for. So it can be also, so that is one sort of a scenario. The second scenario is you have somebody, your child is in contact with somebody who is positive, who is corona positive, or there is somebody who probably is unwell and you think may have the infection. So this is another situation when you need to speak to a pediatrician, because there are a lot of researches coming in, a lot of new guidelines coming in, and so we need to, and so you need to speak to a pediatrician or consult a pediatrician when you are in this situation. Also, when a child has been unwell for the last 2 days, and then the child is not active now, or has been always sleepy, very lethargic, and has other illnesses like has got diarrhea, has got vomiting, or is not taking any fluids or not taking anything to eat. And this is another important reason why and when you need to speak to a pediatrician. Vaccination is extremely important during this pandemic, and we see a lot of parents who find it extremely difficult with the lockdown situation. Also, they are very terrified and very anxious to take children to pediatrician for their regular vaccinations. So especially children who are under 1 year of age, who have to receive their primary vaccination, it is really important for parents to take them to their pediatrician as regularly as possible. Nowadays, a lot of hospitals are also doing home vaccinations. So I think that is actually good for such people who are anxious, for parents who are anxious to take their children out for vaccination. So under 1 year, they are the primary injection. So it is extremely important that we take them on time. Beyond 1 year, they are booster injections. So a little bit of a delay is acceptable and shouldn't be a problem. Maybe about a month is fine. But I think you should, if it goes beyond that, then I think you should take hold of the home vaccination strategies that are available now.
So I have a quick question, doctor, from the
Yes.
chat box.
Yeah.
Can seasonal flu vaccine be given to children up to 12 years old?
Yes, definitely so. Even adults also can take them.
Okay.
So regarding breastfeeding and newborns, I'm a neonatologist. I also deal with children who are newborns and also deal with extreme preterm babies also. So with breastfeeding, we see a lot of, recently now during the second wave, we saw a lot of mothers who had COVID positive giving birth to babies, newborn babies. So breastfeeding is the best for newborn babies, and nothing is even better than breastfeeding. Still, we haven't got anything best than that. So even during this Corona time, we recommend, even if they are COVID positive mothers, they should breastfeed their newborn. The infection is not known to transmit, or it is not known to transmit through breast milk. And the mother should take the adequate precautions, wearing double mask and hand washing and hand sanitizer, and definitely breastfeed her child. There are different scenarios. We've been through different scenarios during the second wave, where it would be either just the mother positive or the entire house, the whole house being positive with corona, and a newborn baby is coming to this house. Then what? So given all these scenarios, I think that there's a lot of research, research that's gone into it, and so the guidelines that have come out is that a COVID positive mother should feed her newborn. If she's breastfeeding, yes, be it. Please go ahead with breastfeeding. We do check COVID. We do COVID tests for the babies as well, depending upon when the mother was COVID positive, and if the mother is sick or if the baby is sick. But breastfeeding is the best for newborn babies, and the mother should breastfeed the child. So there is no scientific evidence for spreading of corona via breast milk. So coming down to a big question that we have now, and effects of lockdown that we are all going through, I think it's created huge problems in every age group, I must say, especially children, because children are the ones that they are still evolving, their mind is still maturing, and they are still actually developing. So there has been a lot of problems in children. And I think, especially with the lockdown, a lot of parents staying at home, working from home, and not being able to go out, children not being able to go out. There has been a lot of mental health issues in the entire family, be it children, be it adults, be it elderly. And there has been a lot of issues with screen time in children, which has created a lot of unknown and weird behavioral problems that we are seeing with children in the recent. There is lack of activity in children, and because of which obesity is becoming a major problem. Now with the third wave, I think what is predicted is that children who have background problems, who have comorbid issues, those children are most vulnerable, and also children who are obese. So given the lockdown, a lot of children have become obese in the recent, I think it is really important that we have to sort this issue out before we are far too late. Because again, not eating right, not eating healthily, snacking a lot, obesity again, coming to that, is also an issue with children. Other chronic health issues like asthmas, allergies, and with all these coming up, unable to access a pediatrician during the lockdown time is another very big problem that a lot of parents find. Now, a lot of pediatricians, I know a lot of my colleagues, we are all accessible by video consultation, and also a lot of them are accessible by WhatsApp. Earlier on, we had our medical council telling us that we're not supposed to be, or it is not legal to give prescriptions over the phone or WhatsApp, and it will not be legalized. But now with the lockdown, I think they have relaxed all this. And so we are now able to speak to our patients, or even communicate to them in terms of at least, point them in the right direction on WhatsApp, by communication through WhatsApp. And video consultation, I think, is actually helped quite a lot of families during this lockdown time. So just about screen time, which is actually very, very important, I think, which I would really like to talk about, because as a developmental pediatrician, we see a lot of children with problems related to screen time. So what is acceptable and what is not acceptable? So under 18 months old or under 2 years of old, or 2 years old, under 2-year-old, all toddlers, 18 to 24 months. So up to 24 months, they are not allowed screen time on a regular basis, unless until they are chatting with their grandparents during the lockdown time, or his family members, close family members, just to keep in touch. Apart from that, they are not allowed any screen time. Why so? Because they do not. Because they do not. What happens is, this is the time when speech develops, and too much of screen time during this time. It is a one-way thing. It is not a two-way. See, when for speech to develop, it's a two-way process. So with screen time, it is only a one-way thing, and children get engrossed with the screen, and they don't seem to reciprocate to anybody else talking to them. So there is no response. They actually see a lot of children regressing in their speech milestones when they are exposed to a lot of screen under 2 years of age. And these are usually parents who are working from home and are unable to spend any time with children, and they are left to the screens. Again, next is preschoolers. Preschoolers are 3 to 5 years. They are allowed about 1 hour per day is fine. So you have to plan this in such a way that they know that this is allowed time during this time when they will actually be allowed for screen time, and you have to and then distract them away from that. And children at this age can have mindful interaction with the characters. So you have to. There is co-watching. Co-watching is highly recommended during this time, so that they help them to understand what they're seeing and they can apply it to the world around them. So many types of screen media content have print or other versions, like try finding books or toys that can enable your child to interact with favorite characters off screen. So this helps in creative play. Again, the next age group is 6 to 10-year-old, up to about 2 hours, 1.5 to 2 hours per day is allowed. Again, there has to be time limit, and the time spent using different types of media. Then also now they are entering school, so you should make sure that they not become a habit for home before the homework gets completed. While developing technical skills is important, try to aim for a balance of creative and laid back time. So this is restricting to this sort of 2 hours per day is extremely important. So under 2 hours per day is important under 10 years of age. Again, 11 to 13, up to about maximum of 2 hours. So 2 hours a day. So you can either do it either in the form, understand, at this age, children can understand the concerns of balance. It is up to the parents to help them see how screen time will fit into their schedule. Try to find your child getting really into certain, if you find that a child is getting into video games for a week or two, so maybe you have to try and help and talk to them, because they are at a stage now where they can understand things. They're able to reason out things with them, and tell them that they are spending too much of time doing that, and it is not going to help them, and it's not going to be a valuable life skill. So I know it's very easy said than done. So to be honest, I'm also having difficult times at home. So it is extremely important that you set your type of targets and be consistent with what you say, and try to reason out with your children at every point of time. It is extremely important that everybody spends some amount of time. So everyone in the family spends time with children, so together. So you could have something like a regular physical activity together. It could be walks or bike rides. I know it's not during the lockdown may not be possible, but sometime now when we are actually down, the quizzes are down, and we are able to get out a little bit, I think it's possible now. Or together, spending a little bit of time in the terrace together with sport or physical activity, or enjoying a movie night together. These sort of things you can this can be done. Reinforce the message by having consistent conversations of appropriate amounts of screen time. So you could maybe designate also media-free time, like dinner time, or sometime when you all are in the car together, maybe it's a time when we all interact as a family. And these are some things that we need to try and achieve to keep a balance in the family. So again, this is again the same thing, home time. So trying to remove, trying to get a balance between family time and media time. So a lot of mental issues, mental health issues for a little bit older children, the adolescent and the teenagers, we've seen quite a lot. It is important for us as parents to try and recognize the signs of stress or behavior changes. Not all children and teens and the teenagers respond to stress in the same way. Some of them can be in terms of excessive worriness or sadness. Some will have unhealthy eating habits. Some will have unhealthy sleeping habits, especially with a lot of exposure, especially if they have a lot of exposure to screen. Ideally, you would want about at least an hour and a half, a couple of hours prior to bed, to cut the screen time off prior to bedtime, 2 hours prior bedtime to cut the screen time off, and so that would help with sleeping and improve the sleeping habits of the children. The other thing that we do notice in children are a lot of attention and concentration issues, especially when they spend a lot of time online playing games or have media games. So that is another attention-related issues and concentration issues that we find in children, especially teenagers. It's very difficult. It's a very difficult task at home. And I think we should all as parents do this for our children to help them with these sort of mental issues and for a healthy future. So some of the ways that I can, which I would like to suggest to keep your children engaged: start reading of books, board games, chess, carom, so board games generally. Maybe getting a new pet into the family would help them divert them off the media games. Then take a new hobby, like something like gardening or singing or music. Online play date is with family members. Then dance competition, challenges, fresh air, rooftop walks. Then cooking. You could make children help you with the day-to-day chores, and maybe some games, board games, Ludo, card games, and all this. Now, coming to an important part is how do you consult your pediatrician? How can you get help? If you have your pediatrician's number, you can try and message them. You could do video consultation. You could, and in situations where you really need to see a pediatrician face-to-face, appointment-based consult is the best because they can schedule time appointments so that there is no overcrowding, social distancing is maintained, and also we are able to maintain the sort of masking and the hand hygiene, and try and spend less time in the hospital or clinic so that waiting time can be cut down if the appointments are made. And stick to appointments. Stick to your appointment time. It's extremely important. And it is extremely important to wear masks for the caretaker, use hand rub, and also maintain social distancing. So this is a topic about vaccination in children, which I said I will talk to you. So the recent information is that in vaccination in children, so how are we going to get our children vaccinated? Is there a vaccination coming in, and when is it due? Well, as per the recent information, we are told that the vaccination is likely to start in August, but we do not know yet. No concrete information on that. And but ideally, it is predicted that the ages of 12 to 18 will be the ones who will be vaccinated first. And as soon as a result of the trial are available, the vaccines in India at the moment that would be available are Covaxin, and the trial is still going on, and it would be available in September. The other vaccine that should be available in India is Zydus Cadila. The trials are available and it is ready. This is the one that we think that it should be available early September. but exact timeline for the vaccine is still not available. So in Europe, we had the Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine, which is used for emergency use for children, and also in America, Moderna vaccine has also been approved. So these are the vaccination for children in the pipeline, and we hope to hear more about children vaccination in future in India, basically. So we are hoping to hear information about this soon. But whatever it is, vaccination could be very helpful for the safety of children, and it is extremely necessary. 12 to 18-year-old kids will be followed by other age groups depending upon the effectiveness on the vaccine, the adverse effects and reaction, if any. If vaccination is available, I think one should surely get it. That would be my recommendation as a pediatrician. Just a few little points regarding school reopening. So we have preschool care, so early care providers, and we have education providers, school providers. So there is a potential risk to the spread of the SARS-CoV-2 virus when school reopens. And that's why it's a fear, and that's why we are all shut, and schools are all shut for the last 1.5 years. So how are we going to make things better? So having known this infection now for the last 1.5 years, what sort of prevention and precautionary measures are we going to take for this? So a school environment involves childcare providers, who are the teachers, who could be the other staff, the frontline staff, the watchmen, the bus drivers, and all of them. And I think it is extremely important for all the care providers, childcare providers, need to be prioritized for vaccination in order to reduce the spread of infection to them and to the children. So this is going to be an important step. Then continuing prevention measures, although they are all vaccinated, I think it is important to continue the preventative measures that we are taking now, and that we think is extremely important to help us prevent the spread of infection, like wearing masks, maintaining social distancing, and hand washing. This should be continued at school at every level, and I think it is really important for the primary care, the preschool care providers, as well as the school care providers, to continue this measure in order to prevent the spread of infection. And a very important thing is plan and prepare. So what is planning? So what do you plan? So these are the two important steps for reopening: is planning and to prepare to expect children, staff, and family members to fall ill, or and so that you have in your child care program what you must do and what you must know to do when this thing happens. And it is important to review, update, and implement emergency operation plans whenever such things happen. So this can be achieved by keeping a track of spread in your area, and also developing healthy communication systems. It could be by SMS, it could be by phone, it could be by online platforms. It is very important to have a healthy communication system between parents and the guardians, and also all the child caregivers, and keep them informed at every stage, so that you form a close net between the school and the entire caregiving system. So you know that if somebody is unwell, what that person needs to do, and that you need to stay off from coming from school. It might be the caregiver, or it might be the student or the parent, that they need to stay away from school, and they need to stay away for how long, and when they need to get medical help, and so that the school is also informed regarding the progress of what is happening. So development of healthy preventative behaviors to reduce the spread and to share it. So towards the end, I would like to give in a few points as a take-home message. I think prevention is the best way to handle the pandemic situation. Vaccination is the key to prevention, along with education of all the people, including parents, caregivers, and the children. Education should include emergency management and important numbers to contact if anyone is sick, and in case they will need any hospital admission. And beyond all, please don't panic. Thank you very much for your patient listening.
Thank you so much, Dr. Madhuri. This was indeed a very, very informative session, a very fast session covering almost all the queries that each one of us had. And now Uma has certain questions to ask, and anybody who has some questions, please type it in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself and ask.
Yeah, many of my questions have been covered, but one question I had is, are there any specific comorbidities in children that make them more prone to COVID? Like in adults, we know diabetes and BP and those kinds of things. In children, what kind of comorbidities make them
See, I
more
think
susceptible?
COVID being more of a respiratory problem, breathing problem. So children with asthma or children with allergies. The other thing, there are children who are on steroids because of their underlying problem. There can be children who are undergoing cancer treatment, or children who are undergoing some sort of kidney problem, have kidney problems and undergoing treatment, and also children who are having diabetes also. So there are a variety of children who do have comorbid situations, and they are on treatment for them. So those children usually have their immunity is actually low, and they are more prone to infections in general. And now that we are going through a pandemic, they are more prone to this COVID infection more than the other children who do not have comorbid infections.
Okay. And what are the quarantine protocols we should follow for really small children? Because we find that many parents are finding it difficult, right? Because they have to be with the child who is infected. Suppose the child is infected and other people in the house are not. So how do they handle such a situation?
See, I think even when the child is infected and others are not.
Yeah.
See, in a situation like that, it's usually the mother who has to isolate with the child. The mother has to wear the so the mother and the child will be under home isolation, or it could be into a room, depending upon how many people are there in the room. See, the more prone are the elderly people. So if you have elderly people at home, it is very important that you isolate whoever is unwell into a separate room. If it is a child who has the infection and is COVID positive, then to take care of the child, if it's a very small child, then obviously it has to be the mother who has to be with the child. And the mother will have to wear mask, double masking, use hand sanitizers and hand, because the child has to be taken care of. It usually is the mother. And we have encountered such situations when there's a mother and the child who are actually isolated. And the other family members stay outside the room, and they usually help take care of the child. They are outside the room and they give all the necessary help that is needed for the parent to look after the child.
Okay, and one more question I had is, can the expectant mother take vaccination, and does it protect the child at all?
So the expectant mother is now, see, up until I think it was April, May, it was end of May actually, we didn't, COVID vaccination was not available for pregnant mothers and also for lactating mothers. Now, since early June, we are vaccinating all pregnant women and even lactating women. So we ask them to take the vaccines, irrespective of whatever stage of pregnancy they are. But usually, it is the gynecologist or the obstetrician who decides which month. Usually, we recommend the second trimester, that is the 4th month onwards, when the expectant mother can take the COVID vaccination. And also all lactating mothers who are feeding their children can take their COVID vaccinations soon after they have given birth to a child. So even after a few weeks after they have given birth, so 2 weeks, 3 weeks, when they feel well, when they are stable and the feeding is established, then they can just go ahead with the vaccination.
Okay, and recently, at least colleges and all, they say that one vaccination is enough and you can attend college. So is that true? Do we need to be double vaccinated, or is one vaccination kind of enough even for the children and adults?
See, as of now, whatever vaccines are available, both the Covaxin and the Zydus, which I had mentioned, both need 2 vaccines. See, ideally, with one vaccination, you are not fully protected. You have only a small percentage of protection, maybe about 30 or 40%. The second vaccination, when you take the second vaccination, and 2 weeks after the second vaccination is when you are fully protected. So you definitely need the second shot also to be fully protected. So the fact about one vaccination actually does not hold. Taking one vaccine and going back to schools or colleges doesn't hold. So 2 vaccines is essential for you to be completely protected.
So anybody else wants to ask questions?
Yeah, doctor, you stated about steroids. So during pregnancy, if the mother has taken some steroid, because we have come up with such cases and queries, like during the during 8th month, something has happened, doctor has suggested a steroid to the mother. So in this COVID time, suddenly type 1 diabetes, I think it is coming up with children. Is there any relation between both the things?
Type 1 diabetes and children, newborn children?
No.
The older children.
Yeah.
I don't think that's got any relation with COVID as such. It could be, they have not found anything in relation to COVID, but it could be a completely different entity. But the steroid and pregnant women, 8th month, 9th month could be because there is an impending preterm labor. And that's when your obstetrician asks you have to take 2 steroid doses. And that is because that is for the maturity of the lung of the newborn baby, so that the baby does not need too much of NICU, ICU care. So baby will be able to breathe by himself or herself. And that's why the obstetrician would have asked the mothers to take the steroid doses. But type 1 diabetes in children has got no relation with COVID as such. I've not known to have any, it's not proven.
So about socializing, doctor, you said online play dates and all that. So are they not allowed to use these common play areas? Sometimes, you have these sanitizers, sprays, which we use for packages arriving. Can we use them and then allow the children to use the play areas? Because it's really difficult for them to just sit at home and have these online interactions, right?
I think recently that's been happening. I've seen a lot of mothers here in our OPD coming and telling me, I started sending to play groups. And I asked them how many children are there. So they say there are only a few children, not many children. So they maintain the social distancing, or at least 2 or 3 in a little group. So it has to be small groups. What we want to avoid is the big, huge groups. And also, if you can try and inculcate the sort of, get the children also into this whole rhythm of, masking. 2 years and above can have their masks on if they are comfortable enough. But 5 years and above, and it becomes mandatory. I think a 5-year-old child understands much better than a 2-year-old. 2-year-old will take it as a joke, and imitate the mother or the parent. That's what they would usually do. But a 5-year-old should be fairly it's become easy for the parent to actually convince the child to wear a mask. At least hand washing and hand sanitizing in these play groups, I think it can be done as a play, and we can help them, teach it in a play form. So if you can do that, that's a great thing. And I think small groups should be fine. See, once this is important thing, isn't it? See, if all the caregivers are vaccinated, at least so those people are vaccinated, and these children are in small groups, and we can try and avoid the spread as much as possible as we can. We cannot sit in our homes. How many years are we going to sit locked down like this? I don't know. So at some point, I think we should take a little bold move and move out of it. So and obviously when we do see that it's coming up, a spread is coming up, or we see the numbers are going up, then we need to put our foot back and withdraw ourselves a little bit back, and then again get back on. So at some point, I think we should try to slowly get out of our little hibernation and come out and start moving all together. But I think in a sensible way, taking all the protection that we need to do for as long as that is needed. Nobody knows how long this is going to last, but I think definitely what everybody knows is these sort of preventative and protective measures are definitely helping us keep the numbers down. And I think if we can follow these as a universal, everybody does it. I think definitely we should be, and in a sensible way, I think we should be able to bring it down to a fair minimum, and so that we can get on with our lives as normal.
Doctor, in comparison to
and everything.
Yeah, if in children, like when we are comparing hand wash to hand sanitizers, like we take hand sanitizer as a shortcut way to just sanitize the children's hands when even if there is soap and water available. So how can we encourage children that wherever soap and water is available to better wash with that and not use the hand sanitizer, because like I had talked to a doctor before, so he said we don't know the long-term effects of hand sanitizer that we are using so rampantly now. So what can you say about that?
So I think if you ask me the difference, if you ask me which you prefer, hand sanitizer or soap and water, yes, it's going to be soap and water. And I think children at every level, if we talk to them in their language and as a play, they will inculcate it much better than saying, no, you need to hand wash, you need to use hand sanitizer now. So in terms of, the germs are there in the hand, so let's do this. This is the best way of getting rid of it. Let's do this and let's do the steps. I think if you do the steps of hand washing as a play, they will inculcate it much better rather than just rubbing the hands sanitizer. Obviously, if that is not available, then you have to stick to it.
Yes, that's true.
Then after using sanitizer, using baby wipes and wiping it off so that kids do not have with the sanitized hand would also help.
The sanitizer, usually the alcohol just evaporates. So rubbing the hand after the hand sanitizer, if you rub it for a little bit longer, maybe half a minute or so, it gets absorbed. It dries up. The alcohol dries up. So it is not going to be harmful at that point. Only if they are wet hands, that's when actually it can, the effects of.
This is very informational, doctor, because generally what was happening whenever I was taking my kids out, if I'm giving them sanitizer, I make sure that I wipe their hands with baby wipes, because I was in a myth that the alcohol content would be, taken in, because the place where water and soap is not available. So it is only after the sanitizer that they are eating something.
Yeah. So you need to rub it for a little bit longer, say half a minute or so, and the alcohol evaporates completely. So it does the job and it is not there on the hands anymore.
This is very informative.
So it's safe to just use the sanitizer and start your meal, etc.
Yeah.
What do you think? When would the children get back to the normal school?
I think we're all waiting for the vaccines.
So vaccines is for above 12 years of age, and what about the ones below that?
No, I think it will be a matter of time, really. Once the 12 to 18-year-olds start getting vaccinated and develop a little bit of confidence, everybody would soon come in to get their other children. We will move down also and we will get the vaccines. And now that the 18 plus have got them vaccinated, so they're all fine and they're all now wanting to getting back to colleges. So now we are the 12 to 18 groups, and then they are the ones who are the 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, whom we are actually in a complete chaos at the moment. So I think they are the ones who need to get back on track as well. So once they get vaccinated, I think it will be the next, it's the 6 to 12-year-olds, and then will be the younger ones. That's the plan.
So after getting vaccinated, it is only the mask and the precautions which we generally, like, we can go out, just that we need to wear our mask and we need to sanitize our hand and maintain a little bit of social distance. That's it, right?
Yes, we can go out. Again, I think we have to be cautious there also. We have to be cautious until we know for sure that we are not having another wave coming through. So we have to be extremely, because see, this masking also is another thing. So I think there are a set of people who constantly do the masking as a sort of, it becomes a routine. There are people who routinely have a mask, but it's below their mouth. It's always in the chin side. And so they are the people who, whatever you said and done, they will not put it up. And there are some people who will mask but put their masks down when they're talking. So there are different sort of categories of people who wear the mask. So it is important that all of us wear the mask above the nose and keep it there and make it as a practice to wear it continuously and not take it out when we are out of the house. So when you're inside the house, it's a completely different. You're in an environment which is different. Again, we have other people who are coming into our houses. So I think if we do it universally, follow this sort of prevention measures for quite some time, then I think it should come down. The infection should come down drastically, and especially it's the spread we are worried about. Once that comes down, then we should be fairly okay. And when that is going to happen, I think it's very difficult.
What type of mask is it suggested for children below 12 years of age?
See, below 12 years of age, cotton, the ordinary cotton masks that we have, that is fine. The cotton cloth masks are fine. You get various cloth masks that are there. That should be okay. I think there are plenty of kids masks. The important thing is to wear appropriate size masks for the same, for the child. Because there are different size masks. You cannot, 12-year-old cannot wear an adult size. So the whole purpose of the mask is gone. So you have a lot of kids masks available now. So that is important. So you need to wear a kid size mask. A kid size mask should be worn by a child, and an adult size mask should be worn by an adult. And also that they should again, the question of having it above the nose and the whole area of this nose and the chin covered should be important. This should be inculcated. So it should not keeping it on whenever you're out of the house, and whenever you're interacting with somebody, and stay at a distance when you're talking to somebody, and don't interact too close. I think this we need to follow as a ritual, as a rule. We have to do that for some time till we are actually sure that things are under control.
So I had a question about vaccination. Yeah. Even at home, I found that the older people, the reaction was less, and for the younger people, the fever was there for 2-3 days. And some people are actually afraid of taking the vaccine. They think it could do them some harm. Yeah. We've heard of some celebrities who passed away after taking the vaccine. So what is going to happen with children? Because all of us will be very worried about that, right? The effect of the vaccine itself.
Yeah, see, I think with this sort of vaccine reaction, I think the numbers, I think the negative fact has been projected far lot than the positive aspects of the vaccine. Yes, there has been reaction. See, any vaccine does have a reaction. It can be as mild as just a little bit of fever, body pains, and that's it. But I know there is some link with some celebrities having passed away having had taken the vaccine. Whether it is a coincidental thing or they do have an underlying comorbid condition which has not come up to light, we don't know yet. But in general, I think we've had variety of vaccines here, and the vaccines usually what we have seen, the side effects have been fever, and especially we have had one vaccine showing a high grade temperature, a lot of people having body pains. And I think we need to remember that any vaccine, it is a little bit of the virus that we are actually injecting into the body, and it is not a live virus, it is a killed virus. Or it can be the one that is actually inactivated. So when you have it's a little foreign body that is injected in, it can cause a little side effect in the form of aches and pains, and a pain in the local site, which is actually acceptable, and a dolo should be fine. Now with children, I think children take a lot of vaccines. Generally, we give a lot of vaccinations to children, and they do take the flu. Most of the children take flu jabs regularly every year. This is another flu jab. And I think they should be, and I think this is like another one added on to the kitty. They're having another extra COVID vaccine. That's it. So I don't think we should switch anything better, but definitely the protective effects and the positives of children having this vaccine is going to be plenty and many than we see the side effects. And I think that's why we are having a trial, and that's why we are not giving, we are not using it as a sort of an emergency use. We are going into a proper trial, and the trial has got 3 different, the results of the first trial, the second trial, the third trial. So the third trial results are yet to come through. So only after that we will be getting the vaccines. So I think we'll be making sure that there are not going to be any issues for the children, and I think that's what every other place and with every other vaccine they have been doing with the COVID vaccines.
So I have one question, Doctor. Indeed, before I ask my question, it was really a very informative session. Thank you so much for all the insights. I have this question, like there are the kids who are born in 2019, 2020, and then they have not seen the real world before mask and after mask. That children, how it will be for them suddenly when the things get normal, how will they take the school thing? Because they have the one who are in there about to get into the kindergarten, about to start their playgroup, they are not getting their learning the basics how it was throughout this years. So I have friends who have this young kids, and they are so much worried because they are missing on this initial learning age, which is so much they're looking forward to. So they have friends who kids are like daily they're asking, when are we going to go for a school, when are we going to start our school? And some of them are excited, and some of them are like now out of clue what's going to happen, like how these kids will take when the things gets normal.
I think I agree with you. We see a lot of children, especially, I think the worst affected are the ones who are under 5,
Yeah,
because they are the ones, they have not seen school at all.
at
And for
all.
them, school is just, a computer screen, online classroom. And a lot of them don't even know who they are, which school they are studying in. So they say, which school are you in? Online class. This is what I get from them. So it's very sad actually that I think each sector, I think these under 5, then you have the 5 to 10-year-olds. So each one has been affected in their own way. So and it is very, very sad to see them actually, but they are the ones actually who are the worst affected. The foundation has been a problem, and it is very sad. And I think they are the ones who are having a lot of behavioral issues as well. I can see, because they are the ones who are affected a lot in the lockdown. They have not seen the outside world.
Outside
So,
world, exactly.
so
They
they
don't
are
know the
actually
normal
inside.
routine. They have just seen the work from home, the
Absolutely.
parents working from the home. Suddenly, if the father is going out for the work, they are not able to accept it also sometimes.
And they come to the hospital for vaccination, and they are afraid completely to see people around in masks, caps,
Mask.
and aprons. They are terrified. You see them all wailing and crying. This typically happens once the lockdown ends and people start walking in for vaccinations. We see them all coming in, and all children crying, and the whole OPD is full of crying kids. It's not that, it's bad. It's really bad and sad. It's a very sad sight to see actually, because it's very sad for these children. It's no fault of theirs. They are actually locked indoors, and they have not seen any. And parents are scared and anxious to take them outside, so they have not seen anybody outside, and they are really scared, terrified, constant crying. Leave alone the vaccination. They come out into the OPD and they're crying, crying, crying. They don't want to see people. It's very sad.
Very sad.
Yeah.
And one more question was recently, like I'm from Bangalore, doctor, and in neighborhood there is one apartment, and they just started. The apartment had got Delta variant cases. Initially, it started with 12 cases, and now yesterday news was somewhere around 82 cases in one series. That is a one series in the flat. So does it means that it travels this variant travels through pipe or all that?
No, I think it's got to do with more sort of interaction only with people. It could be even your maids who are passing around, or the other workers who are, between. So if it has happened in one particular block, it could be people who are walking in, walking out between apartments. So it doesn't travel through pipes. It is more the air.
Now they've
air
sealed the
droplet.
society totally. That society has been seized.
Yeah.
So, but then I was wondering, because I also stay in gated community, and this kind of news, when it comes from your neighborhood, it's like literally little frightening.
Yeah.
So do we have questions? So, Doctor, Umaji, are you done with your questions?
Yeah, whatever I have written here, I've done, because doctor also answered many of them in her presentation. It was a very comprehensive, detailed presentation.
Very, very nice presentation.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
So
I'm very sorry you had to wait for so long for the presentation.
So we were very happy that a baby was being delivered, and we wish we could also see the baby. And
They are small preterms, 30-week twins.
Oh, twins.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. They're very small ones. Maybe you can call 7.5 months, not even 9 months yet. So little ones, preterm. That's why it was an emergency. That's why.
so it's really a privilege to be here on the forum with you, doctor, and it's so inspiring to see someone like you. Like all of us in our hearts always dream to be someone as bright and as good as you.
Thank you so much.
Doctor, literally, you've come from the OT and you've come on our Zoom platform.
That's
That's
amazing.
right.
That's really
Absolutely.
commendable.
Absolutely. I'm still
That's
in
also
hospital.
amazing to be in that state of mind, first delivering that emergency and then here, and the wonderful that presentation which you gave. I mean, hats off to you.
Thank you
Actually,
so
hats
much.
off to you, doctor.
That's fantastic. And
Thank
so
you very much for the
informative. I
opportunity.
think most questions of ours have been answered. And I hope that's true for most parents as well, right?
Yes, so we are just waiting for things to get back to the new normal, and
Absolutely.
get back to school and even for us to start our offices and move out.
Absolutely. I think we're all looking forward to it. I really thank you so much for the opportunity, that I've been given. And I think especially I've been delayed, but you've had the real patience to wait through and sit through this presentation. Thank you so much.
So thank you so much, Umaji, for moderating the session so well. And thank you so much, Dr. Madhuri, for being there with us in spite of your tough time and taking out time for us and being here and presenting so much of views in front of us. And we were just awestruck with the presentation that you have made, so detailed, and it covered almost all of our questions. And I also thank all the council members who are present here with for all their patience to stay with us till 7. And thank you for those who are watching us live on Facebook. Thank you to the state councils to always be there with us. And last but not the least, thank you to Dr. Harveen Arora, who has given us this platform where such good information can be shared. So thank you so much, Dr. Madhu, and thank you so much. We are truly obliged that you are here with us.
Can we all have an quick picture with Dr.?
Yes.
Switch on. Rinku and Anju, we need your video on. I think they might have some technical glitches, so I'll just click. Thank you so much.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye.